I never imagined I'd end up where I am today. If you had told me a few years ago that I'd be running my own tech startup, I'd have laughed in your face. I wasn't the techie type, didn't grow up surrounded by computer geeks, and I had no idea how to code. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, and sometimes it's those very curveballs that shape the path to your success. It all started in 2017. I was fresh out of college with a degree in marketing. At 22, I was optimistic but clueless about where my career would go. I started working as a social media manager for a small company. It was a pretty standard gig. I created posts, scheduled them, and tracked engagement metrics. But after 6 months, I realized that I was not just bored. I was losing interest in everything. I wanted something bigger, something that I could own. I just didn't know what that was yet. One evening, while scrolling through my social media feed, I came across a post that changed everything. It was a friend from college talking about how they had launched their own startup, a small app that was gaining traction. The more I read, the more my mind started to race. I had always been fascinated by tech, but I had never thought it could be something I could dive into, especially considering my non-technical background. Yet, here was someone who wasn't much different from me, and they were doing it. I started reading everything I could about how people start tech companies. It wasn't easy. A lot of it was dense, full of terms I didn't understand. But something clicked in me. I wanted to learn more. I wasn't going to let lack of technical expertise stop me. So, I started to learn how apps were built, at least on a basic level. I read books, watched YouTube tutorials, and even enrolled in online coding courses. Slowly, I started to understand what went into building an app and how the tech ecosystem worked. Then, in early 2018, I had an idea for an app. It wasn't revolutionary, but it was something I felt could help people. I called it Tidy Up, an app designed to help people manage their cleaning tasks more effectively by breaking them down into smaller, manageable steps and giving reminders. It was a simple concept, but I thought it had potential. I knew I needed a co-founder. I couldn't build this thing alone, especially given my lack of coding experience. So, I reached out to my friend Sam, who had been working as a junior developer. He wasn't a senior developer by any means, but he had a good grasp on the basics, and I knew he had the drive. When I pitched him the idea, his eyes lit up. We agreed to give it a go. We spent the next 6 months working tirelessly. We worked out of my tiny apartment, often coding until late into the night. I did the marketing side of things, designing a logo, writing a pitch, reaching out to potential users, and Sam focused on building the app. We hit a lot of roadblocks. There were plenty of moments when I thought it wasn't going to work. We had bugs, crashes, and endless issues with the app's design. There were even times when I thought about quitting altogether. But every time things got tough, I reminded myself why I started. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. That I wasn't just another person who talked about dreams but never acted on them. By the end of 2018, we had a working prototype. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. We decided to launch it in early 2019. We didn't have a massive marketing budget, so we started by reaching out to influencers in the home and lifestyle space. We used social media, email campaigns, and a bit of word of mouth to get people talking. The first few months were slow. We had a handful of downloads, mostly from people we knew or people who stumbled across our app on social media. But it was enough to keep us going. We kept improving the app, adding new features based on user feedback. We also made sure that our customer service was top-notch. I personally replied to every email and message from users. We wanted them to know that we cared about their experience. Then, in the summer of 2019, something incredible happened. One of our early users, a popular Instagram influencer, posted about our app on their story. The post went viral. Within hours, our download numbers spiked. We were flooded with new users. We spent the next few days scrambling to fix bugs and improve the app's performance. We were overwhelmed, but it felt like a dream. As downloads continued to rise, we decided to invest in more marketing. We hired a freelance developer to help with the code, and I focused on partnerships and getting Tidy Up featured on media platforms. We partnered with cleaning companies, home goods stores, and influencers in the wellness and productivity space. This strategy started paying off in a big way. We went from 5,000 downloads in the first quarter of 2019 to 100,000 by the end of 2020. The growth was exponential. We had more users than we ever expected, and we quickly realized that we needed to hire. We brought on a small team, another developer, a designer, and a community manager. With their help, We refined Tidy Up and launched a premium version with additional features. Revenue started pouring in, and by the end of 2021, we were a profitable company. Looking back, the journey wasn't easy. There were days when I wanted to quit, days when I felt like I was failing, but I kept going. The key was persistence. I didn't give up when things got tough. I focused on the bigger picture, and I kept learning. I learned from my mistakes, I learned from my team, and I learned from my users. By 2023, we were not only profitable but expanding. We had a small office, a growing team, and we had even started working on new apps. My dream had turned into a reality. I had gone from working as a social media manager to being the CEO of my own tech startup. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Now, I'm often asked for advice from aspiring entrepreneurs. My answer is always the same. Just start. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to be willing to put in the work, learn along the way, and keep going, even when it feels like nothing is working. The road to success is long, but if you keep moving forward, you'll get there. If I can do it, anyone can. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I was just another 22-year-old college graduate with a degree in business, hoping to land a corporate job and start my real life. The reality, however, was much more difficult than I had anticipated. After dozens of rejections, I found myself stuck in a dead-end job at a call center, making barely enough to cover rent and student loans. The idea of working for someone else for the rest of my life was suffocating, and one night, after yet another rejection letter from a dream company, I realized something. I was sick of waiting for someone to give me a chance. I decided I would take my future into my own hands. It wasn't some grand epiphany that pushed me to start my own business. It was frustration, plain and simple. But I knew I didn't want to just do anything. I wanted to do something I was passionate about. I had always loved gaming and technology, so after researching the market, I decided I'd try my hand at creating a custom gaming PC business. It seemed like a niche, and in my mind, the demand for custom-built PCs was booming. After a few weeks of research and saving what little I could from my call center paycheck, I registered my business and started building a website in the few hours I had outside of work. I won't lie, starting out was terrifying. I was working full-time, spending every spare moment trying to learn how to build a proper website and handle the technical side of things. In the beginning, the business had no customers. None. I had an Instagram account with a few followers, and my website was sitting there, barely attracting any traffic. But I was determined. I began posting daily, showcasing some of the gaming rigs I had built. I started small, buying parts in bulk from wholesalers, and using my savings to purchase the most popular components I thought would appeal to gamers. The first few months were brutal. I remember one night in particular. I just finished my first custom PC build for a client who ordered it online. I was up until 3 a.m. assembling it, and when I finally powered it up, I realized I had made a small mistake with the wiring, and the computer wouldn't boot. I almost threw the thing out of the window. But that's the thing about entrepreneurship. You have to learn to deal with failure. It wasn't just about fixing the PC. It was about fixing myself and my mindset. I wasn't going to quit because things didn't go as planned. I spent hours watching YouTube tutorials and reading forums, learning from others who had been there before me. Eventually, I got the PC to work, and I shipped it off to the customer, who was thrilled with the final product. That moment was a turning point. The feedback from my first happy customer spread through word of mouth, and I began to get more inquiries. Slowly, my brand started to grow. I focused on offering more personalized services, including consultations for gamers who didn't know exactly what they wanted but had a budget in mind. I also started doing PC upgrades for people who already had machines but wanted better performance. The breakthrough came when I made a social media post showing a rig I had built for a local esports tournament. A popular gaming influencer reposted it, and within hours, my website was flooded with orders. The first few orders were tiny compared to the big players in the industry, but to me, they felt like the biggest wins of my life. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The next hurdle I faced was scaling up. I had grown quickly, but I didn't have the systems in place to handle all the new orders. I was still a one-man operation, doing everything from sourcing parts to assembling PCs to customer service. I hit a point where I was getting more business than I could handle, and I knew I needed help. I made the decision to hire my first employee, a skilled technician who could help with the builds. Hiring him was a huge step, but it was also a risk. I wasn't making enough profit yet to comfortably support payroll, but I knew that if I didn't scale up, I would burn out. The first few months with my new employee were rough. There were growing pains as we figured out processes and learned to communicate efficiently. We were still working out of a tiny, rented workshop that barely had enough space for 2 people. The constant stress of having to make payroll while still trying to make the business profitable kept me up at night. But I had one thing going for me. I knew my products were top-notch, and I had a loyal customer base who loved the quality of my builds. Then came another unexpected twist. One of my clients, a streamer who had been using one of my PCs for their setup, recommended me to a major YouTube influencer. This influencer had a massive following and did regular PC build reviews on his channel. I reached out to him, offering a custom gaming rig in exchange for a review. The influencer accepted, and when the video dropped, my website exploded. The influx of orders was insane, and I found myself scrambling to keep up. To handle the surge in business, I invested in a better workshop, hired a few more employees, and streamlined my processes. The growth was overwhelming, but it was also rewarding. Over the next year, my business became one of the go-to brands for custom gaming PCs in my region. We expanded our offerings to include custom peripherals like keyboards, mice, and headsets, and even started offering personalized PC maintenance services. Looking back now, I realize just how much I've learned. The failures and setbacks were necessary for me to understand what it takes to run a business. From the sleepless nights to the stress of payroll, to the satisfaction of seeing a satisfied customer post their new rig online, every step of the journey shaped me into the entrepreneur I am today. Now, my company generates over $2 million in annual revenue, and I have a team of 15 full-time employees. We're no longer just a local brand. We've expanded nationwide and even ship internationally. But the best part? I get to wake up every day and do something I love. I've learned that success isn't just about financial gain. It's about the journey, the lessons, and the growth along the way. I used to dream of getting a real job. Now, I realize that the real job is the one I built for myself. I started my business in a small one-bedroom apartment. Looking back, it seems almost impossible that we went from that tiny space to a thriving company with a team of 50 employees. The journey wasn't linear, and it was anything but smooth, but every twist and turn taught me something valuable about myself and the world of entrepreneurship. I had always been the type of person who believed in the power of self-reliance. Raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs to keep us afloat, I understood early on that if you want something, you have to go after it yourself. In my case, what I wanted was to build something meaningful, something that would not only allow me financial freedom, but also impact the lives of others. It all started with a simple idea. I was 24, working in a dead-end job that barely covered my rent and student loans. I was a customer service representative for a company that sold niche tech gadgets. The work was soul-sucking, the kind of job where you're on the phone all day, resolving complaints and pushing products no one really cared about. But the more I spoke to customers, the more I noticed a pattern. People were frustrated with the lack of genuine customer support in the tech industry. Everyone was just focused on sales, and no one cared about creating lasting relationships. I knew there had to be a better way. One evening, after a particularly brutal day at work, I sat down and wrote out a plan for a new kind of tech company. My idea was simple: offer high-quality tech products, but more importantly, provide exceptional customer service. I wanted to build a company that didn't just sell things, but actually helped people solve problems, gave them expert advice, and treated them like family. I didn't know how I was going to pull it off, but I knew I had to try. I decided to take the leap. I quit my job, sold my car, and moved into a cheap apartment to save money. The first few months were brutal. I had no office space, no investors, and no backup plan. I spent every waking hour researching, contacting suppliers, and trying to build a website. But it was clear that the hardest part wasn't the logistics. It was getting people to trust me. My first product launch was a disaster. I had sourced a batch of smart home devices, but they arrived defective. I lost money on the launch and got terrible reviews. It felt like the universe was telling me to give up, but I refused. I kept reaching out to the customers who had left bad reviews, asking them what went wrong and how I could make it right. I offered refunds, replacements, and even free tech support to anyone who was unhappy. Slowly, word spread that I wasn't some faceless e-commerce site, but a real person trying to make a difference. I didn't have money for advertising, so I relied on word of mouth and social media. I reached out to tech bloggers and influencers, offering them free products in exchange for honest reviews. It was a slow burn, but eventually it paid off. People started talking about the guy who actually cares in the tech world. That's when things began to change. I hired my first employee, Sarah, who had experience in customer service and shared my vision. She was a rock star. With her help, we built a system that prioritized fast response times, personalized communication, and genuine problem solving. I made sure every email, every chat, and every call felt personal. People loved it. They told their friends, and their friends told their friends. Within a year, we went from being a tiny operation to having a steady stream of customers. As we grew, I had to learn how to manage a team, and that was its own set of challenges. At first, I thought I could do everything myself. I was used to being the person who handled every detail, but as we scaled, I realized I couldn't do it all. I needed to trust my employees and delegate. It was hard, and there were definitely moments where I thought I was going to burn out. But with each new hire, I learned to step back and focus on what I was best at, the big picture. 2 years in, I had a full-fledged business. We were profitable, but the stress was overwhelming. I had to handle everything, from HR issues to marketing to product development. My health started to decline. I wasn't sleeping, eating properly, or taking care of myself. I realized I needed help, not just for the business, but for my own well-being. I hired a coach who specialized in helping entrepreneurs manage stress and build sustainable businesses. It was the best decision I ever made. My coach helped me set boundaries, prioritize self-care, and learn how to lead without burning myself out. I started delegating even more and trusting my team to handle things that I used to micromanage. That shift was pivotal. But the real turning point came when we launched a new product line that focused on eco-friendly tech. I knew the market was moving towards sustainability, and I wanted to position my company as a leader in that space. I spent months researching suppliers, making sure the products were high quality and that they met ethical standards. We launched our eco-tech line with a small but dedicated marketing push, and it blew up. Our customers loved it, and the media started to take notice. We got features in major publications, and our sales exploded. It was a validation that the hard work, the sacrifices, and the sleepless nights were finally paying off. By the time we hit year 4, we were a household name in the tech space. We had expanded to a larger office, hired more employees, and built out a customer service team that was second to none. Our eco-friendly product line became our best seller, and we even began offering consultations and workshops on sustainable tech for other businesses. But despite the success, I always try to remind myself of where I started. The small apartment, the sleepless nights, the feeling that I was in over my head. It all seems so distant now, but it wasn't that long ago. Every decision, every failure, every success led to where I am today. I'm not perfect, and I still make mistakes, but I've learned that the journey isn't about avoiding failure. It's about learning from it and never giving up. Now, when I look at our team and our customers, I'm proud of what we've built. It's not just a business, it's a community. We've helped thousands of people solve their tech problems, and we've made a real impact on the environment with our sustainable products. I'm not just the CEO of a company anymore. I'm a part of something bigger, and that's the most rewarding thing I could have ever imagined. Entrepreneurship isn't for the faint of heart. It's hard, often lonely, and sometimes overwhelming. But it's also one of the most fulfilling things you can do. If you have a dream, a vision, and the grit to see it through, don't let anything hold you back. Keep going, because you never know where that next step will take you. I was never one of those people who dreamed of being an entrepreneur. Growing up, I wanted to be a teacher. Simple, right? I loved helping others, and I always excelled in school. However, life had other plans for me. My journey into the world of business started unexpectedly, as most great stories do, with a mix of desperation, bad decisions, and a little bit of luck. Let me explain how I went from being a teacher wannabe to running my own startup. It all started in my final year of college. I had this grand vision of getting a teaching degree, maybe working in a local high school, and living a quiet, happy life. But during my senior year, the economy took a major downturn. Jobs in education were getting scarce. Schools started laying off teachers, and it didn't take long for me to realize that the traditional career path I had in mind was quickly slipping away. Desperation set in. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life after graduation. It was around this time that I met my first business mentor, Sam. Sam was a couple of years older than me, and he had just sold his first startup, a small tech company, for a decent profit. He was the kind of guy who could talk about business for hours and somehow make it sound exciting. We met at a mutual friend's party, and over a few beers, he told me about his journey of building and selling his company. It wasn't glamorous. In fact, it sounded like a complete roller coaster ride. He had faced failure after failure before striking gold, but what impressed me most was how calm and confident he was throughout it all. Success is not about getting everything right from the start, he told me that night. It's about persistence. And sometimes, it's just about being in the right place at the right time. Those words stuck with me. I had no real business experience, but I had the desire to do something more, to get away from the stagnant career prospects in education. I decided to take a leap of faith, take a risk, and try something I had never considered before, starting my own business. I started small. I figured the best place to begin was with something I knew well. As a college student, I had always been the go-to person for helping other students with study materials, notes, and tips for exams. I started offering personalized tutoring services online, focusing on helping students prepare for final exams. At first, it was just me, a basic website, and a bunch of social media posts. I didn't have a business plan or any real marketing strategy. I just hoped people would notice. The first few months were a grind. I spent countless hours trying to get my name out there, responding to students, giving free advice to build trust. Slowly but surely, I started gaining a few clients. I felt like I was actually building something. But the real breakthrough came when I made my first big decision. I hired someone to help me with marketing. Her name was Lucy, and she had recently graduated with a degree in marketing. We connected through a mutual friend, and after a quick conversation, I decided to take the plunge and bring her on board. Lucy was a game changer. She revamped my website, set up a solid social media campaign, and helped me attract more clients. I was making money, and more importantly, I was learning how to run a business. But things didn't stay easy for long. After a year of steadily growing my tutoring business, I hit a plateau. My clients were mostly repeat customers, but I wasn't bringing in many new ones. I needed to expand, but I didn't know how. That's when Sam reached out to me again. He had been following my progress, and while he was happy for me, he noticed something important. I was stuck. "You're doing great, but you're playing it too safe," he said over coffee one afternoon. "If you want to grow, you need to think bigger. What if you could scale your business?" At first, I was resistant. Scale? I barely had enough time to manage the handful of students I was already working with. But then Sam explained something that would change everything: automation. He introduced me to the idea of creating an online course, something that could generate revenue passively without me being directly involved in every interaction. At first, I wasn't convinced. Who would pay for an online course when there were so many free resources available? But Sam insisted that if I could provide value in a structured, organized way, people would pay for the convenience and the expertise. After months of working on it, I launched my first online course. The course focused on exam strategies, time management, and study techniques for college students. I spent countless hours filming videos, creating downloadable resources, and refining the content. It wasn't perfect, but I was proud of it. And then, nothing happened. I got a few sales, but it wasn't the flood of clients I had hoped for. I felt like I had failed. That's when Lucy, who had by now become an integral part of my team, suggested we use paid ads to reach a wider audience. I hesitated at first. Advertising seemed like such a foreign concept to me. But after a lot of persuasion, I decided to try it. The first ad campaign we ran was a disaster. We wasted hundreds of dollars on ineffective ads, and the results were dismal. But we didn't give up. We refined our approach, analyzed our target audience, and kept tweaking our message. By the third campaign, we finally saw some traction. People were buying the course, and they were actually leaving positive reviews. I wish I could say that success came quickly from there, but it was a slow climb. However, once I had the formula figured out, things started to take off. More courses were developed. We expanded into other topics, such as productivity and test prep for specific fields. We built a team of content creators, marketers, and customer service reps to help manage the growing demand. But the real turning point came when I decided to invest in something bigger, a mobile app. The idea was to make studying even more accessible for students, offering bite-sized lessons and reminders right on their phones. The app wasn't cheap, and at that point, we didn't have much capital. But it paid off. The app quickly gained traction, and my business exploded in ways I had never imagined. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. From barely scraping by with a one-person tutoring business to running a full-fledged online education platform, I've learned more about resilience, creativity, and patience than I ever imagined. I'm not one of those success stories who went from broke to billionaire overnight. It took years of mistakes, late nights, and risky decisions. But the one thing that kept me going was the belief that with persistence, anything was possible. And now, I get to do what I love, help people, and make a living doing it. The dream of becoming a teacher didn't die. It just transformed into something bigger and more impactful than I ever thought possible. If there's one piece of advice I can give, it's this. Don't be afraid to pivot. Life will throw curveballs, but every setback can be an opportunity to grow, learn, and try something new. And sometimes, all it takes is the courage to take that first step, even if it feels like you're walking into the unknown. I always dreamed of running my own business, but the path to get there wasn't as clear-cut as I had imagined. It's a classic rags-to-riches story, but not the kind you might expect. I wasn't born into a wealthy family, nor did I have a network of connections waiting to help me. I came from a small town, with parents who worked hard to make ends meet. My first entrepreneurial lesson came not from a book or a mentor, but from watching my mom struggle with our finances and how she would constantly look for ways to make extra money. When I was young, I was obsessed with technology. I spent hours at my computer, learning how to code and fix things that most people didn't even know were broken. I never thought it would lead to anything big, but looking back, that's where it all started. My first taste of entrepreneurship came in high school when I began offering my services to local businesses. I would design websites, manage their social media accounts, and help them with whatever they needed to improve their online presence. At first, it was just pocket change, but then I realized that there was a market for what I was doing. I started treating it like a business, and that shift in mentality changed everything. I graduated high school and went to a state university, but the transition from being a small-time freelancer to managing a full-fledged business was a huge leap. I made a lot of mistakes in those early days, mostly because I wasn't prepared for the complexities that came with running a business. In college, I ran a small digital marketing agency with a couple of friends, but it was always chaotic. We lacked structure, and despite having some great clients, we struggled to keep up with demand. It was hard, and I seriously doubted whether this was the right path for me. But the thing about entrepreneurship is that failure doesn't always look like it's the end of the road. Sometimes, it's just a detour. That's when I decided to take a hard look at myself and my business and see where I could improve. I quit the agency in my final year of university. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but I knew I needed to focus on my own skills and learn more about business management if I wanted to succeed. I took a job at a tech startup during my last semester. I figured if I could learn how they ran things and what made them successful, I could apply that knowledge to my own ventures. What I didn't expect was how much I would learn about myself in the process. I was surrounded by incredibly smart people, all of whom had different skills and experiences. I realized that my obsession with doing everything myself was holding me back. In order to grow, I needed to build a team, delegate tasks, and trust others. Once I graduated, I returned to my freelancing roots, but this time, I was different. I was more focused, more organized, and most importantly, more open to collaboration. It wasn't long before I started attracting more serious clients. I landed a project with a large local retailer to overhaul their e-commerce platform. It was a massive project, and at first, I was overwhelmed by the size of it. But that's the thing about entrepreneurship. Sometimes you need to jump into the deep end, and the only way to learn how to swim is by doing it. I took on the challenge, hired a couple of freelancers to help, and worked tirelessly to make sure the project was a success. It was during this project that I started to realize that I could scale my business and expand beyond just myself. From that point on, things started to snowball. The work I did for that retailer led to other big projects, and soon I had a full-fledged team of developers, designers, and marketers. We specialized in building e-commerce platforms for small to medium-sized businesses, and I made it a point to really understand the pain points these businesses faced. We didn't just offer services, we built solutions. And that's what set us apart from the competition. Despite the success, the early days of scaling weren't without their challenges. Managing a growing team was tough, especially when I was still figuring out how to balance work and personal life. There were times when I felt like I was being pulled in a million different directions, and I had to learn how to delegate effectively. I also learned how important it was to take care of myself, something I hadn't done during the earlier years of my business. There was a period when I felt like I was burning out, and I realized that in order to be a successful entrepreneur, I had to prioritize my mental and physical well-being. The turning point for my business came when I finally had the opportunity to work with a major tech company. They were looking to develop a new platform and had heard of my company's reputation. It felt surreal, like I was stepping into a whole new world. I was terrified, but once again, I pushed through my fear and took the opportunity. That partnership was the key to taking my business to the next level. The project was a huge success, and after that, my company became known in the tech industry. Looking back on the journey, I can't help but feel proud of how far I've come. From a college kid working out of my dorm room to running a company with over 30 employees, it's been a wild ride. The road was anything but smooth, but every setback taught me something valuable. The failures, the late nights, the self-doubt, they all played a role in shaping the entrepreneur I am today. What I've learned through it all is this: entrepreneurship isn't about getting everything right. It's about learning from your mistakes, being willing to adapt, and never giving up. The key to success is persistence and having the right people around you. When I was starting out, I thought I had to do everything myself, but now I realize that building a strong team and knowing when to ask for help are the real secrets to success. If there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone looking to start their own business, it would be this: don't expect a straight line to success. There will be bumps, twists, and turns, but as long as you keep moving forward and stay focused on your goals, you'll get there. The entrepreneurial journey is messy, but it's also incredibly rewarding. The road may not always be easy, but it's worth every step. I was always the kind of person who liked to take risks, but nothing prepared me for what would become the defining moment of my life. It all started in 2017 when I was 25 years old, working a regular 9-to-5 job at a marketing agency. The work was fine, but there was a void in my life that I couldn't shake. I had big dreams of becoming an entrepreneur, but I was stuck in a cycle of routine that left me feeling unfulfilled. I would scroll through my social media, seeing everyone's highlight reels, friends, family, influencers, talking about their latest adventures, businesses, or products. It made me feel like I was wasting my potential, but I didn't know where to begin. I had no prior experience in starting a business, no mentor to guide me, and the risk seemed too big to take. I remember one night sitting at my desk, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen as I tried to brainstorm what I could possibly do. I didn't have a groundbreaking idea, just a passion for finding something new. That's when I saw a random Facebook ad for a course about dropshipping. I'd heard of it before, but never really looked into it. For those who aren't familiar, dropshipping is a business model where you sell products online without holding inventory. You just find a supplier who ships directly to the customer when an order is made. It sounded almost too good to be true, and a part of me thought it was just another get-rich-quick scheme. But another part of me, the part that was tired of feeling stuck, was intrigued. The next day, I spent hours researching everything I could about dropshipping. I scrolled through articles, watched YouTube tutorials, and read reviews of different courses. The more I learned, the more excited I became. I saw other people, just like me, starting businesses from their laptops, working from anywhere in the world, making money while they slept. It was the kind of freedom I dreamed of. After about a week of binging content, I decided to pull the trigger and buy an online course. It wasn't cheap, but I figured it was an investment in my future. Little did I know, that course would become both the catalyst for my success and a reminder of how hard the road would be. The first few weeks were exhilarating. I spent hours setting up my online store, designing the website, and choosing products to sell. I remember being so proud of my store when it was finally up and running. It wasn't much, but it felt like my dream was becoming a reality. I was on cloud nine, convinced that the sales would start rolling in any day. But then, nothing happened. Not a single order. For weeks, my store sat there, a beautiful ghost town. I kept tweaking the website, adjusting the ads, and trying different products. Still, nothing. It was frustrating, and I was starting to feel like a failure. There were days when I'd wake up, check my store, and see that there were still no orders. I tried to stay positive, but the voices of doubt were getting louder. Maybe this isn't for you, they said. Maybe you're just not cut out for this. I began questioning everything. Did I make a mistake? Was I wasting my time and money? But I couldn't give up. I refused to let my dream die just because it was hard. One thing I didn't expect was how much learning I would have to do. The course had taught me the basics, but I quickly realized there was so much more to running a successful dropshipping business. Marketing was a whole new world I had to learn, and I had no idea how to get my store in front of the right people. I spent money on Facebook ads, Instagram influencers, and Google ads, but my return on investment was terrible. I was losing money faster than I was making it. But I couldn't quit now. I kept experimenting, reading blogs, watching tutorials, and tweaking my ads. After months of trial and error, something clicked. My ads started converting. I wasn't making a fortune, but I had my first taste of success. I remember the day I made my first sale. It wasn't much, just a $25 order, but it was proof that I could do it. That first sale was everything. It was validation that I was on the right path. As the months passed, I continued to refine my strategies. I started to focus on understanding my customers more, using analytics to make better decisions, and creating content that resonated with my target audience. Slowly but surely, sales began to pick up. I started making consistent profits, and my confidence grew. I was no longer just an office worker. I was a business owner. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. In 2019, I hit a roadblock. The supplier I was working with suddenly went out of business, and I was left scrambling to find new suppliers. My revenue took a huge hit, and I felt like everything I had worked for was falling apart. I remember feeling so overwhelmed that I almost gave up. But then I remembered how far I had come. If I could start from scratch with nothing, I could rebuild again. I found new suppliers, revamped my website, and improved my product selection. Within a few months, my business was back on track, stronger than ever. Fast forward to today, and my dropshipping business has grown beyond anything I ever imagined. I'm now generating 6 figures in revenue annually, working from home, and living the life I always dreamed of. I've since expanded into other areas of e-commerce, launched my own brand, and even started mentoring others who want to follow the same path I did. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. But it wasn't easy. I've made countless mistakes, faced self-doubt, and experienced failure more times than I can count. But every failure taught me something valuable, and every setback pushed me closer to where I am today. If there's one thing I've learned through this journey, it's that success doesn't come overnight. It's about persistence, learning from your mistakes, and never giving up, even when it feels like the whole world is telling you to quit. I know now that the road to success is long and full of obstacles, but it's worth it. Because at the end of that road, there's freedom. There's the ability to control your own destiny and live life on your own terms. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business, whether it's dropshipping, an online store, or anything else, my advice is simple. Go for it. Don't let fear hold you back. Start small, learn as you go, and be prepared for the challenges that will come. But most importantly, keep pushing forward, no matter how tough it gets. Success isn't just about having a great idea. It's about having the resilience to keep going even when things aren't working out. It may be hard at first, but trust me, it's worth it. Every single step, every late night, every ounce of doubt you fight. In the end, it all adds up to something incredible. And when you look back at how far you've come, you'll realize it was never about the destination, it was about the journey. I had always considered myself a pretty average guy. Grew up in a small town, went to a public school, did decently in college, but never stood out. My family wasn't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. I was raised with solid values. Work hard, stay humble, and do your best at whatever you're doing. That's the advice my dad gave me. My mom's advice was more focused on education. Knowledge is power, she'd say. But none of that made me feel particularly special. I didn't have a big dream growing up, and I wasn't the kid who had a grand vision of changing the world. I was just trying to get by, and for the most part, I did. I graduated from college, landed a mediocre job at a software company, and lived in a modest apartment in the city. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a life. I didn't realize how much this mindset was holding me back until I was 27 and had what I'd later call my midlife realization. I was at a point where I was doing well in my job, but not well enough to feel truly successful. I was caught in that frustrating spot where I had a comfortable enough life, but I knew I was capable of more. The problem was, I didn't know what that more was. One night, I was sitting in my tiny apartment, scrolling through Reddit as usual, and came across a post from someone talking about how they turned a side hustle into a 6-figure business. I was intrigued, so I clicked on the link, and the more I read, the more inspired I became. This person didn't have any special qualifications. They weren't born into wealth. They just found a need, filled it, and worked relentlessly to turn it into something big. It was a light bulb moment for me. I realized that I had been sitting around waiting for an opportunity to fall into my lap, but I hadn't been actively seeking one. The idea that anyone, even someone as average as me, could create something successful from scratch was eye-opening. I knew I had to try something. I didn't have a clear idea at first, but I started researching ideas. I knew I had some skills in software development, but I didn't want to just create another app. I wanted something that could make a real impact on people's lives. After weeks of brainstorming, I landed on a simple idea. What if I could build a platform that helped small businesses improve their customer service through automation? I wasn't sure if anyone would even care, but I figured I had nothing to lose. I had a decent amount of savings from my job, and I wasn't living an extravagant lifestyle, so I could afford to give this idea a shot. For the next few months, I worked on building the platform after work hours, using my evenings and weekends to code and design. There were a lot of frustrating moments. I spent countless hours troubleshooting bugs, redesigning user interfaces, and wondering if anyone would ever use it. My friends and family thought I was crazy for working so much on this side project, especially since I still had my stable job. But in my gut, I knew I had something that could work. It was a slow burn. I wasn't making any money, and I was still working 40 hours a week at my day job, but I kept pushing forward. My friends started to notice that I wasn't going out as much or chatting about the usual stuff we did. I'd become obsessed with this idea, and I couldn't stop thinking about how I could make it better. After about 6 months, I finally launched the product. The first month was disappointing. I barely got any sign-ups, and I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I spent more time marketing, reaching out to small businesses, and offering free trials to get the word out. Slowly, but surely, people started to take notice. They liked what I was offering, and word of mouth started to spread. By month 3, I had a steady stream of customers, and by month 6, I was making more from this side hustle than I had from my full-time job. That was the turning point. I remember the day I made the decision to quit my job. It wasn't an easy decision. I had the security of a steady paycheck, health insurance, and all the benefits that came with a traditional job. But I knew deep down that I had to go all in on this. I couldn't keep playing it safe and hope that success would find me. So, I took the leap. I quit my job, rented a small office space, and hired my first employee, a customer service rep to help with the growing demand. It felt like a massive risk at the time, but looking back, it was the best decision I ever made. The first year after quitting my job was a blur. There were highs and lows, late nights and early mornings, but the growth was undeniable. I'd put in more hours than I ever thought possible, but every hour felt like it was pushing me closer to my goal. I watched my customer base grow, and the feedback from businesses using the platform kept me motivated. Eventually, I was able to bring on more employees, developers, marketers, and eventually a CTO who helped take our technology to the next level. We launched a major update to the platform that streamlined customer interactions even further, and that was when things really took off. By year 3, our small business automation platform was generating 7 figures in revenue. It wasn't just about the money, though. It was about proving to myself that I could build something from the ground up. I wasn't some lucky kid who was handed an opportunity. I was a guy who took a chance and worked tirelessly to turn an idea into a business. Every time I look at the company now, I still feel that sense of pride and accomplishment. But here's the thing that most people don't tell you. It doesn't get easier. The challenges evolve. Now, instead of worrying about building something from nothing, I'm constantly thinking about how to scale, how to maintain our company culture as we grow, and how to stay ahead of the competition. Every day is a new challenge. And yet, despite all the stress and pressure, I wouldn't trade it for anything. The journey from that clueless 27-year-old, sitting alone in my apartment, to the entrepreneur I am now has been the most rewarding experience of my life. If you're reading this and feeling stuck, or if you're just waiting for the right moment to start your own thing, here's what I'll say. Don't wait for everything to be perfect. You're never going to have all the answers, and there will always be risks. But if you want it bad enough, you'll find a way to make it work. And above all, keep going. The first step is always the hardest. The rest is just a matter of persistence, learning from your mistakes, and keeping your eyes on the prize. If I can do it, so can you. I used to be just like you, scrolling through Reddit, reading about these incredible entrepreneurs who started with nothing and built something amazing. I'd read their stories and think, wow, they're so lucky. They had the right idea at the right time. But trust me when I say this, luck had little to do with it, and my journey was anything but a straight line. If anything, it was a chaotic, messy, unpredictable ride that almost broke me. But looking back now, I can say it was all worth it. It all started when I was in my early 20s, freshly out of college, and stuck in a dead-end job at a marketing firm. The 9-to-5 grind felt like a cage, and every day I was fighting against this overwhelming sense that my life was passing me by. I was good at what I did, but I wasn't passionate about it. I felt like I was wasting my time helping brands sell products I didn't care about. But I didn't have the courage to quit. After all, I had bills to pay, student loans looming over my head, and the pressure to not disappoint my family who had supported me through my education. Then came the day I overheard a conversation in the break room between two coworkers. They were talking about how they had invested in Bitcoin years ago and how they'd made a fortune. One of them was talking about how he was now driving a sports car, living in a penthouse apartment, and basically living the life everyone dreams of. He even said that he made more money in 1 month than I'd make in 2 years. It hit me like a slap in the face. That conversation didn't just sting, it ignited something inside of me. I didn't want to be stuck in a rut forever. I wanted something more. That night, I went home and Googled how to invest in Bitcoin, which led me to forums, articles, and eventually a rabbit hole of crypto. Now, this was back in 2017, when Bitcoin was surging to new heights. It wasn't too late, but it wasn't exactly early either. I did my research, watched endless YouTube videos, read everything I could find, and finally felt ready to take the plunge. I remember the first time I made a purchase. I used every penny I had saved up. I bought $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, thinking, this is it. This is going to change my life. The next day, Bitcoin dropped. And then it dropped again. And again. I didn't panic. I was prepared for volatility, right? But then I watched it drop more, and my stomach twisted. I felt like an idiot. I had no backup plan. I hadn't diversified my investments. It was all or nothing. For a brief moment, I thought I'd made the worst mistake of my life. But here's the thing. I didn't quit. Instead, I doubled down. I kept buying, watching the market, learning from others who had done it before me. Slowly but surely, things started to turn around. I watched Bitcoin rise to heights I hadn't expected. Within months, I had made back my initial investment, and then some. But it wasn't just about making money. It was about realizing that I could learn something completely new, take risks, and actually succeed. That feeling? It was addictive. But just when I thought I had it all figured out, the market crashed. It was 2018. Bitcoin plummeted. I lost a ton of money. My confidence, which had been soaring just a few months earlier, was shattered. I started questioning everything. Had I made the right choice? Should I just cut my losses and get out before it all came crashing down again? I felt completely lost. I took some time off from trading to really think about what I wanted. I could have easily gone back to my 9-to-5 job, to the comfort of a predictable paycheck, but I didn't want that life anymore. I realized that if I was going to succeed in this, I needed to stop relying on luck. I needed to take control, take bigger risks, and diversify. Around that time, I stumbled upon the idea of building a business around the same things that had helped me learn about crypto education. People wanted to learn about investing, but they didn't have the time or the knowledge to get started. They were intimidated by the complexity of crypto and stock markets. And that's where I saw an opportunity. I knew I had no formal business background. I was just a 24-year-old who had stumbled into a world I barely understood, but I was passionate about it. I wanted to help others learn how to invest intelligently without feeling like they had to become experts overnight. So, I took the leap. I started a small online course teaching the basics of investing, particularly in cryptocurrency and stocks. I didn't have any investors or mentors to guide me. I had no clue about marketing, SEO, or how to build an audience. But I knew how to learn. I spent nights reading up on digital marketing strategies, building a website, creating course content, and running ads. The first month was slow. I only made a few sales, but I was learning. I started growing my audience on social media by sharing my journey and insights, connecting with people who were in the same boat as me. I realized that people didn't just want the how-to knowledge. They wanted someone they could trust, someone they could follow along with. So, I built a community around my course. Slowly, it started gaining traction. Word of mouth spread, and people began recommending the course to their friends. My email list grew. My Instagram followers grew. I was making more money than I ever did at my 9-to-5 job, but it wasn't just the money that mattered. What mattered was that I had built something from scratch, something that had the potential to grow even bigger. But success didn't come easily. There were countless setbacks. The platform I hosted my course on crashed once during a major sale event. I had to manually refund customers, and I almost lost my entire audience's trust. I made mistakes, big ones. I tried to scale too quickly and ended up burning out. But I learned from those mistakes. I learned to balance growth with sustainability. Fast forward a few years. Today, my course business has evolved into something much bigger. I now teach people not only about investing, but also about building their own online businesses. What I once thought of as a side hustle has grown into a full-fledged business with multiple streams of income. I've even been able to quit my day job and focus entirely on this. I don't have a fancy office, but I do have freedom, and that's something I wouldn't trade for anything. I don't tell you this to boast. I tell you this because I was once sitting where you are, reading these stories and thinking, this will never happen to me. But I'm here to tell you that it can happen. It won't be easy, and you'll face many obstacles along the way. But if you keep learning, stay persistent, and take calculated risks, you'll find your way. It might take years, but you can build something incredible. And when you do, you'll look back and realize that every mistake, every failure, and every hard decision was worth it. So, if you're still sitting in that 9-to-5, wondering if there's more to life, take the leap. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because that moment will never come. Start today and build the future you've always wanted. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I've been an entrepreneur for over a decade now, and my journey is one of those against all odds stories that people love to hear. But let me be honest, it wasn't always glamorous. There were years of struggle, failures, and learning the hard way. My success didn't come overnight, and frankly, I don't even think I've reached the top yet. But looking back, I'm proud of how far I've come. It all started when I was in my mid-20s. I had just graduated with a degree in business, but I wasn't your typical eager-to-please student who had everything figured out. I had big dreams, but I didn't have any connections, nor did I have money to back up my ideas. I remember walking around the city feeling like I was invisible, just another face in the crowd. I'd look at successful entrepreneurs on social media and think, that's what I want. But reality kept slapping me in the face. My first business was a complete disaster. I tried to launch an online store selling custom clothing. I thought I had found a niche that people would love, clothes with motivational quotes, inspiring people to chase their dreams. I spent months designing the website, sourcing products, and setting up social media ads. The problem was that I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't understand marketing, my target audience, or even how to price my items. It was a textbook case of build it, and they will come. Spoiler, they didn't. I spent thousands of dollars on ads that went nowhere, and the website traffic was abysmal. It was a crushing blow, and it hit me harder than I thought it would. I felt embarrassed. I had poured everything into this idea, and it had failed. I had to shut it down after 6 months. But, like every entrepreneur, I didn't let it defeat me. I was broke, yes, but I also had a hunger to try again. I moved back in with my parents, who were not thrilled by the idea of me taking another shot at starting my own business. They kept saying things like, maybe you should look for a stable job, and you've tried this before, maybe it's time to give up. But I knew deep down that I wasn't meant for a regular 9-to-5 job. I knew I had something to prove. My next idea was a mobile app. The idea came to me one night after I'd gotten frustrated with the constant struggle of keeping track of my goals and personal tasks. I wanted a simple, minimalist app that helped people focus on their goals without all the clutter and notifications that come with bigger apps like Google Keep or Todoist. I did some research, and I realized that there was a gap in the market for a task manager that wasn't so overwhelming. At that point, I didn't have any technical skills, but I knew how to hustle. I taught myself to code, spending sleepless nights watching tutorials, trying to grasp even the most basic concepts. I found a freelance developer on a website, and after some negotiating, I convinced him to help me build the app for a fraction of what it would have cost. It wasn't pretty at first, but it was functional. The app launched with very little fanfare, but to my surprise, people actually started using it. Slowly, users began giving feedback, and I adjusted the app to better suit their needs. One of the biggest turning points was when a major tech blogger featured my app in a roundup of best productivity tools for 2022. That moment was a game changer. My downloads skyrocketed, and the app started gaining traction. But the journey wasn't easy. Even as downloads increased, I faced new challenges. Managing customer support, troubleshooting bugs, and handling the financial side of the business was overwhelming. At one point, I had to take a loan to keep things afloat. I was living paycheck to paycheck, unsure if I would ever turn a profit. But I believed in the product, and I pushed forward. After months of late nights and a lot of trial and error, I found my rhythm. The app became profitable, and I started investing in new features. I hired a small team to help with development, marketing, and customer support. It was a huge leap, but it was necessary if I wanted the business to grow. The app became more polished, and word of mouth helped it spread even further. Looking back, I'm amazed at how far I've come. That little app, which I initially thought was just a side project, is now my main source of income. But even now, it's a constant grind. I still work long hours, tweak things that aren't working, and try to stay ahead of the competition. There's always someone new trying to build the next big thing, and it keeps me on my toes. But here's the thing. The financial success is nice, but it's not what keeps me going. What drives me is the impact. When someone messages me to say that my app helped them stay on track with their goals or manage their time better, that's what makes all the hard work worth it. I've gotten to the point where I'm not just running a business. I'm building something that actually helps people. That's the kind of fulfillment you don't get from just having a job. I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, and I've faced rejection from investors and partners who didn't believe in my vision. But I've also learned that rejection doesn't define me. It's the lessons I learned from each failure that have brought me to where I am today. The road wasn't smooth. In fact, it was full of potholes. There were times when I wanted to give up and times when I doubted myself. But with each challenge, I grew stronger. I learned that success isn't just about the destination, it's about the journey. It's about the hustle, the grind, and the ability to adapt when things aren't going your way. So, if you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, I'll tell you this. It's not going to be easy. You will fail. You will face rejection. You will wonder if it's all worth it. But if you have the passion and the persistence to push through, there's a chance you'll make it. And trust me, when you do, it'll be worth every sleepless night. Right now, I'm not a millionaire, but I'm content. I'm not chasing after massive wealth or fame. I'm chasing fulfillment. The kind that comes from knowing I'm doing what I love and building something that has the potential to make a real difference in people's lives. And while I don't know what the future holds, I do know one thing. I'm not done yet. I've got plenty more to learn, and I'm excited to see where this journey takes me next. So if you're thinking about quitting, don't. Keep going. The best is yet to come. I never thought I'd be here. If you had told me 10 years ago that I'd own a thriving business, I would have laughed and walked away. I was just a kid from a small town with big dreams, but no real plan. Now, sitting in the middle of a conference room in my own company, preparing for a quarterly meeting with my team, I can't help but reflect on the journey that brought me here. This is my story, and I hope it inspires someone out there to take that first step toward making their dream a reality, no matter how impossible it may seem. It all started in a small town where opportunities were scarce. My parents worked hard, but money was always tight. I remember when I was younger, my dad would always talk about how he wished he could afford to give us more, but he just couldn't. That always stuck with me. I made a promise to myself that I'd find a way to change our family's financial situation, not just for me, but for everyone who came after me. After high school, I didn't go to college. I didn't have the money, and honestly, I didn't know if I'd be able to keep up with the academics. But I was determined to find a way to make something of myself, so I moved to the city in search of better opportunities. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that sitting at home wasn't going to get me anywhere. At first, I bounced around from job to job, waiting tables, working in retail, and eventually landing a position as an assistant at a small digital marketing agency. I didn't have much experience, but I worked hard, stayed late, and tried to learn everything I could. The agency was small, and the owner was a great mentor. He taught me about SEO, social media marketing, and all the nitty-gritty details of the digital world that were just starting to take off. It was around this time that I began to think about starting my own business. It seemed like the logical next step, but I had no money to get started. I saved up every penny I could over the next few years. I worked long hours, cut back on anything unnecessary, and started learning everything I could about entrepreneurship. I subscribed to blogs, listened to podcasts, and read books by successful entrepreneurs. It didn't matter that I didn't have much money or a prestigious degree. I realized that if I worked hard enough and smart enough, I could make it happen. Finally, after 3 years, I had saved up enough to start my own agency. I was terrified. I didn't have a lot of clients, and I didn't have any real credibility. But I had something even more important: grit. I started reaching out to small businesses in the area, offering my digital marketing services. Most people turned me down, but I didn't give up. I kept reaching out, kept offering value, and eventually, I got my first client. It was a local coffee shop that needed help with its online presence. That first client was a game changer. I worked day and night, doing everything I could to help that coffee shop grow. I revamped their website, helped them improve their social media presence, and launched a targeted ad campaign. Within a few months, their sales skyrocketed, and they started sending me more referrals. Word of mouth spread, and my client base grew. I was able to hire a couple of employees to help with the workload, and the business began to pick up steam. But success didn't come easy. There were countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times when I almost threw in the towel. One of the hardest moments came a year after I started the business. We hit a rough patch where clients weren't paying on time, and cash flow was tight. I couldn't afford to lose any clients, so I took a personal loan to cover expenses. The pressure was immense. I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. But I didn't want to fail. I knew if I just kept going, I could turn things around. I got on the phone with my clients and worked out payment plans. I negotiated better deals with vendors, and I started working even harder to deliver results. Slowly but surely, things started to turn around. That year, we managed to break even, and the following year, we doubled our revenue. I won't lie, there were moments when I thought it would all collapse, and I'd be back to square one. But I stuck it out. I hired a few more people and started offering more services. We expanded into content creation, branding, and even video production. I found ways to streamline our operations and make our team more efficient. Over time, we gained a reputation as a top-tier digital marketing agency, and businesses started coming to us instead of the other way around. By the time I hit my 5th year in business, we were doing well enough that I could finally pay myself a comfortable salary. I was able to buy a house for my family and pay off the debt I had accumulated in the early days. But the real reward came when I was able to start giving back to my community. I set up scholarships for local students who wanted to get into digital marketing, and I created internship programs for young people looking to get their start in the industry. I never forgot where I came from, and I wanted to help others who were in the same position I had been in. Today, my agency employs over 30 people, and we work with clients from all over the world. I still have the same hunger I had when I first started, but now it's fueled by the desire to continue growing and helping others. I've learned that success isn't just about money or fame. It's about doing something that makes you proud and knowing that you're making a positive impact on the world. I often get asked what the secret to my success is, and my answer is simple: persistence. There's no magic formula. You have to be willing to work harder than anyone else, be adaptable when things don't go as planned, and keep pushing forward even when it feels like everything is falling apart. It's not easy, but if you stick with it, eventually, things will click. So, to anyone out there who's thinking about starting their own business or pursuing their dreams, just go for it. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. You just need to start, take one step at a time, and never give up. I'm living proof that it's possible, no matter where you come from or how many obstacles you face along the way. If I can do it, so can you. I've been an entrepreneur for the past 5 years, and I want to share how I turned my struggling side hustle into a full-fledged business that now supports my family and employees. It all started when I was working as a middle manager in a large corporation, living what I thought was the dream. The pay was decent, the benefits were solid, and I had a stable routine. But inside, I was restless. I always had this nagging feeling that I could be doing more, that I could be in control of my own future rather than relying on someone else's vision. One day, I came across an article online about a guy who quit his 9-to-5 to start a small business from home. He was selling products on Etsy, and his story was inspiring. He wasn't making a fortune, but he had a sense of fulfillment I could never quite find at my corporate job. That night, I stayed up late, reading more and more stories about people who had taken the leap and started businesses from scratch. The idea of building something from the ground up sounded incredible, but it also terrified me. What if I failed? What if I lost everything? But after weeks of back and forth, I decided to take a calculated risk. I started with a small side hustle, selling handmade candles. It wasn't glamorous or groundbreaking, but I had a passion for the craft. The process of creating the candles was meditative, and I loved the idea of bringing something beautiful and useful into the world. I began by selling them at local farmers markets on weekends, and the response was positive. People loved the quality of my products, and I soon started making enough money to cover the cost of my hobby. I didn't want to quit my day job right away, though. I was cautious. So, I continued working full-time while growing the business on the side. I spent my evenings and weekends refining my candle-making process, researching trends, and figuring out what kind of branding would resonate with customers. I learned everything I could about e-commerce, marketing, and social media. At first, it felt like I was just treading water, putting in hours without seeing massive results. But after about 6 months, I had a small following online, and I was starting to build a customer base. The turning point came when I got a message from a small boutique in a nearby town. They wanted to carry my candles in their store. This was huge. It was the first time I saw real potential in my side hustle. I realized that my candles weren't just a weekend hobby. They could become a legitimate business. But it also meant that I had to make some tough decisions. If I wanted to scale, I couldn't keep working full-time and running the business on the side. Something had to give. I remember that conversation with my boss like it was yesterday. I sat in his office and told him that I was planning to leave. He was shocked and asked why. I explained that I wanted to pursue my passion and grow my candle business. He tried to talk me out of it, telling me it was too risky and that I'd be making a huge mistake. But deep down, I knew it was the right time. The business was growing, and I couldn't ignore the opportunity anymore. The first year of being a full-time entrepreneur was tough. There were so many sleepless nights, so many times I doubted myself. I had to learn how to manage the day-to-day operations, handle customer service, and juggle the financial side of the business, all while ensuring that the quality of my candles didn't slip. I didn't have a big budget for marketing, so I relied heavily on word of mouth, social media, and collaborations with influencers to get my products out there. I remember my first sale through an online marketplace, just a single candle. I was ecstatic. That sale felt like validation, like proof that I wasn't crazy for leaving a stable job. I kept pushing, reinvesting every penny I made back into the business. Slowly but surely, the sales started to increase. I hired my first part-time employee to help with production, and as things grew, I expanded into wholesale. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't glamorous. There were months when we barely scraped by. I remember struggling to pay the bills when sales were low, but we pushed through. As my business grew, I learned some tough lessons. The biggest one? Cash flow is everything. I had no idea how hard it would be to manage money when you're running your own business. It's not just about making sales. It's about managing your expenses, paying employees, and ensuring you have enough inventory for the next round of orders. I made mistakes. Some costly, some minor, but each one taught me something valuable. There were months where I had to dip into personal savings to keep the business afloat, but I never gave up. 2 years in, I started to see the fruits of my labor. My candles were now sold in several stores, and I had built a loyal online customer base. It was a small team, but we were growing. I hired 2 more employees to help with marketing and customer service, and I even rented a small warehouse to keep up with demand. I could finally afford to pay myself a salary, which was a huge milestone. The 3rd year was when things really started to pick up. I started getting larger wholesale orders, and my candles were being featured in bigger retail stores. I also expanded my product line, adding new scents and styles. We created seasonal collections and began collaborating with other small businesses, which helped us reach even more customers. I also focused on branding, making sure that my candles weren't just a product, they were an experience. I wanted people to feel something when they bought them, not just light a candle. Now, 5 years later, my business is thriving. We have a full team, a steady stream of orders, and a strong online presence. We've been featured in several magazines, and our candles are sold in stores across the country. I'm not yet at the level of those large corporations, but I'm proud of what I've built. I've learned more about myself, about perseverance, and about the value of taking risks than I ever did in my corporate job. I still remember the fear and uncertainty I felt when I first started, but looking back, I realized that taking the leap was the best decision I ever made. I now have the freedom to set my own schedule, create something I love, and most importantly, help others do the same. I've had the privilege of watching my employees grow and thrive alongside the business, and that's something I'm incredibly proud of. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business but are scared of failing, know this: failure is part of the journey. Don't let fear stop you from pursuing your dreams. It's not going to be easy, but if you stay persistent, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward, you can build something amazing. It won't happen overnight, but it can happen if you keep going. I'll never forget the day I decided to start my own business. It wasn't some grand epiphany, nor was it the result of an elaborate plan. It was born from desperation and a little bit of stubbornness. Back in 2015, I was working a dead-end job as a marketing manager at a mid-sized tech company. The pay was decent, but the work was monotonous, and the opportunities for growth were almost non-existent. Every day felt like I was just clocking in and out without any real purpose. My boss at the time, Greg, was the type of manager who had no idea how to inspire a team. He was a good guy, but he had no vision, no leadership skills. He'd always hand us half-baked ideas and expect us to execute them perfectly. I remember one time when he wanted us to completely rebrand the company with no real direction or research behind it. It was a disaster waiting to happen, and yet he was convinced it would work. I was fed up. So one day, while sitting in yet another pointless meeting, I had a thought. Why not just leave and do something for myself? Maybe I could finally create something meaningful, something I actually care about. It wasn't a fully formed plan, just a momentary feeling of hope. A week later, I walked into Greg's office and handed in my resignation. The look on his face was a mix of surprise and confusion. I don't think he ever saw it coming, but it felt like the right thing to do. My heart was racing as I drove home that day, unsure of what was next. But deep down, I knew I had to make it work. I had no choice but to figure it out. At first, I didn't know where to start. I was terrified, but also excited. I had some savings, so I figured I could live off that for a little while I figured out my next move. I began researching business ideas, reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and listening to podcasts about entrepreneurship. The more I learned, the more I realized I wanted to start a business in the digital marketing space. I knew the industry well enough to feel confident, and I could see the growing demand for digital marketing services as more companies realized the importance of online presence. The problem was, I didn't have any clients. I didn't have a brand. I didn't have anything, really. But I wasn't about to let that stop me. I created a basic website with a simple landing page offering my services. I made sure it was clean, professional, and showcased a few marketing strategies I had developed during my time at the tech company. I also wrote a blog, hoping to show potential clients that I knew what I was talking about. The idea was simple: give away free content and demonstrate my expertise, hoping it would lead to leads. For the first month, nothing happened. I didn't get a single inquiry, and I started to feel the pressure. I'd check my email every morning, praying for something, anything. I thought about going back to a regular job, but something in me refused to quit. I couldn't go back to that life. I refused to let fear control me. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. A small business owner in my area reached out through my website. She was struggling to get her store online, and after looking at my blog and services, she wanted to discuss how I could help. My heart skipped a beat. It was my first real potential client. We had a long conversation about her business, and I pitched her on a full digital marketing plan, including website optimization, SEO, and social media marketing. It wasn't the biggest project in the world, but it was something. She agreed to hire me, and just like that, I was in business. Over the next few months, I put everything I had into helping her business. I worked day and night, often staying up until 3 a.m. tweaking ads, writing blog posts, and testing strategies. Slowly but surely, her sales started to grow. She was ecstatic with the results, and word started to spread. I was getting referrals, and my client base grew steadily, though not without its struggles. In the beginning, it wasn't glamorous. I was working out of my living room, sometimes struggling to pay the bills. I made mistakes, learned tough lessons, and faced rejection from potential clients. But I kept pushing forward, refusing to let setbacks define me. I joined local business networking events, connected with other entrepreneurs, and continued to improve my skills. One of the biggest challenges I faced was scaling my business. At first, it was just me doing everything: client communication, content creation, strategy development, and execution. But as my client base grew, I realized I couldn't do it all on my own. I needed to hire a team. I was terrified of the financial commitment, but I knew it was the only way to take things to the next level. I took a leap of faith and hired 2 employees, both with marketing experience but different skill sets. The transition wasn't smooth, there were growing pains, and I had to adjust to being a boss. I had to learn how to delegate, manage a team, and trust others to execute my vision. But as the team grew, so did the business. We started taking on larger clients, and our reputation for delivering results started to snowball. Fast forward to today, and my agency is a 6-figure business with a team of 10 full-time employees. We've worked with Fortune 500 companies, developed campaigns for major brands, and helped dozens of small businesses grow their online presence. We've expanded our services to include content marketing, paid advertising, and web design, and we've built a reputation for excellence in the industry. But the journey hasn't been easy. There were many sleepless nights, self-doubt, and moments when I questioned whether I had made the right decision. I learned that entrepreneurship is not a straight line. It's messy, unpredictable, and often feels like you're walking in the dark. But every small victory, every client who came back for more, made it worth it. Looking back, I'm proud of how far I've come. There are still challenges ahead, and I'm constantly learning and evolving as a business owner. But I can confidently say that starting my own business was the best decision I ever made. I've created something I'm passionate about, I've built a team I'm proud of, and I'm in control of my own destiny. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that entrepreneurship is all about resilience. It's about pushing through the tough times, learning from your mistakes, and never giving up. No one is going to hand you success on a silver platter. You have to go out and take it. So if you're thinking about starting your own business, take that leap. It might be scary, and it might not be easy, but I promise you it's worth it. Believe in yourself, keep pushing forward, and remember that the only way to fail is to quit. And that's exactly what I learned on this journey. As long as you refuse to quit, you can't fail. It was 2015 when I hit rock bottom. I was 25, broke, and living in a tiny, run-down apartment with barely enough money for food. I had dropped out of college a few years earlier, determined to make it on my own. My friends were graduating, starting careers, getting jobs in offices, but I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. It wasn't like I hadn't tried I had tried everything. For years, I jumped from one side hustle to another, trying to find something that stuck. I worked as a delivery driver for food apps, sold handmade jewelry on Etsy, even tried my hand at freelance writing. But nothing ever panned out. My savings account had a balance of $23, and I was barely able to keep my head above water. The idea of starting my own business seemed so far out of reach. Every time I thought about it, I was overwhelmed by the uncertainty and the risk. How could someone like me, with no formal education and no connections, possibly build something worth anything? But I had this nagging feeling that maybe, just maybe, it was the only way out of my misery. I'll be honest, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I had a few things going for me. I had always been decent at sales, I loved technology, and I could see that the world was becoming increasingly dependent on the internet. I knew businesses would need an online presence to succeed, and I started to wonder if I could help with that. So, I took a leap of faith. I decided to try my hand at digital marketing, focusing on helping small businesses build their online presence. I had no experience in the field, no clients, no portfolio, just the belief that I could figure it out. I started researching everything I could about SEO, social media marketing, and content strategy. I watched countless YouTube videos and read blog posts until my eyes were blurry. The first few months were a blur of cold emails, networking, and sending out proposals to anyone who might listen. I'd wake up early, work all day, and hustle through the night. It felt like I was getting nowhere, but I kept pushing. Then, one day, I got a bite. A small local restaurant reached out after receiving one of my cold emails. They needed help boosting their online presence and getting more customers in the door. I was ecstatic, but also terrified. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was too afraid to admit it. I knew I had to deliver. I put everything I had into that first project. I created a website for them, set up social media accounts, and ran a few ad campaigns. Within a few weeks, they started seeing results. More people were coming in, more customers were following them on social media, and their revenue was increasing. It wasn't huge, but it was a start. That was the moment everything changed for me. I realized that I could actually help businesses grow. I wasn't a failure, I was a problem solver. From there, word of mouth started to spread, and I started picking up more clients. At first, it was just local businesses, but as I learned more, I was able to offer services to clients all over the country. The thing is, I didn't get lucky. It wasn't some magic formula that made me successful. I had failed countless times, and I had no safety net. What made the difference was consistency. I kept showing up, kept learning, and kept taking risks. And slowly, but surely, my little side hustle grew into something real. Fast forward to 2020, and my business had grown to the point where I was able to hire a small team. We were handling campaigns for clients all over the world, from small startups to established brands. We had built a reputation for getting results, and the referrals started pouring in. But just as things were looking up, the pandemic hit. For a brief moment, I thought it was the end of the road. My clients were dropping like flies. Some went out of business, others cut their marketing budgets, and it felt like everything I had worked so hard for was slipping away. I could have thrown in the towel. I could have decided that it wasn't worth the fight anymore. But something inside me said, no, this isn't over yet. Instead of giving up, I adapted. I pivoted. I took on new clients who were trying to figure out how to survive during the pandemic. I started offering additional services, like crisis communication strategies and pivoting ad campaigns to reflect the new reality. I even launched a new product that helped businesses with online sales during lockdowns. While many businesses were cutting back, I was doubling down. I started investing in the future, pushing the envelope on what we could offer our clients. I made it my mission to help them thrive even in the worst of times. And slowly but surely, my business began to bounce back. By the end of 2021, we had not only recovered but grown to a level I hadn't even dreamed of back in 2015. We had clients in every industry you could imagine: healthcare, tech, e-commerce, you name it. Our revenue had skyrocketed, and I was able to hire more people, expand our offerings, and scale the business faster than I ever thought possible. But here's the kicker: money was never the driving factor. It wasn't the reason I kept going. It wasn't the reason I pushed through when everything seemed impossible. It was about the challenge, the grind, and the feeling of knowing that I was creating something from nothing. It was about solving problems and helping others grow their businesses. The financial success was just a byproduct of the work. I still remember those early days, living paycheck to paycheck, staring at my empty fridge and wondering if this whole thing would ever work out. I remember the loneliness and the uncertainty, but I also remember the fire that drove me, the passion that kept me going when everyone else had written me off. Today, my business is a multi-million-dollar company. We have a team of over 50 people and work with some of the biggest brands in the world. But the journey hasn't been easy, and it's never been about the destination. It's been about the growth, the lessons learned, and the people I've met along the way. So, to anyone out there who feels like they're stuck, who feels like they've tried everything and nothing is working, just remember, the only way out is through. Keep pushing, keep learning, and never give up. You never know when that one client, that one opportunity, that one idea will change everything. It could happen tomorrow, or it could happen 5 years from now. But if you don't keep showing up, you'll never know. And trust me, it's worth it. I remember the day I realized I was no longer just getting by in business. It wasn't an overnight success story. It wasn't a flash of brilliance that propelled me to greatness. It was a slow, grinding realization that I had spent years building something worthwhile. That was the turning point for me, the moment I knew I had created a legacy. It all started when I was fresh out of college. Like most grads, I had big dreams but no clear path. My degree was in business management, but I was clueless about what that actually meant. I had no family connections to help me out, and my student loan payments were already looming. My first job was in retail, sales associate at a small chain clothing store. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. I figured I would stick it out for a while, get some experience, and then move on. One thing I did well was read. I consumed books, articles, and interviews about entrepreneurship, about people who started from nothing and built empires. I became obsessed with the idea of being my own boss. I knew I had to get out of the rat race, but I had no money and no clear idea of how to start. It wasn't until I met a guy named Rick that things started to shift. Rick was the manager of the store, and he had this air of confidence. He was the kind of guy who would walk into a room, and people would listen. He was approachable, but he carried himself like someone who had been through the fire and come out on top. Over time, we became friends. We talked a lot, and eventually he asked me about my plans. "Do you ever think about starting your own thing?" he asked one afternoon as we were closing up the store. It caught me off guard. At that point, I had barely entertained the idea. Sure, I dreamed of it, but I didn't know how or where to begin. Rick, however, wasn't the type to just let things slide. He gave me a crash course in the basics of business. He didn't tell me what to do. He just opened my eyes to the possibility. I'll never forget the first piece of advice he gave me. Don't wait for the perfect moment. There will never be a perfect moment. Start now and figure it out as you go. That hit me hard. It was like someone had lit a fire under me. I realized that I had been sitting around, waiting for some kind of divine intervention. I had been stuck in analysis paralysis, reading about success but never actually doing anything about it. Rick had a side business selling custom t-shirts online, and he showed me the ropes. He explained how the internet could be a goldmine for those willing to hustle. It was an eye-opener. He didn't start out with much. He worked a 9 to 5 and did his side hustle in the evenings, often late into the night. But he was making real money. And the best part? He had control of his time. That was the dream I had, too. That night, I couldn't sleep. I spent hours researching the online market for t-shirts. I was hooked. The next day, I went out and bought a basic screen printing kit with some of the money I had saved. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get me started. The first few months were grueling. I worked my day job, and then at night, I would print shirts in my apartment. I made a lot of mistakes, prints that came out wrong, designs that didn't sell, but I learned quickly. Every failure was a lesson. The first t-shirt I ever sold, I felt like I was on top of the world. The real turning point came about 6 months into my side hustle. I had managed to build a small but consistent customer base. I remember getting an order for 50 shirts from a local high school. They wanted custom shirts for their senior class. That was the order that made me realize I could actually scale this thing. Up until then, I had been treating it like a hobby, but suddenly I was faced with a real business opportunity. The problem was I didn't have enough time. I was working full-time and struggling to keep up with the orders. I remember lying in bed that night, wondering how I could make this work. That's when the idea hit me. I could outsource the printing process. I didn't need to do everything myself. I could focus on marketing, sales, and customer service, while someone else took care of the production. I didn't know the first thing about outsourcing, but I did what I always did. I researched. I found a local printing company that offered fulfillment services. I reached out to them, and they agreed to partner with me. From there, things began to snowball. With the fulfillment side handled, I was able to focus on growing my brand. I started marketing aggressively on social media, especially Instagram, and my business started getting noticed. But the most important lesson I learned during those early years was the power of persistence. There were many moments when I wanted to quit. The money wasn't flowing in fast enough. The competition was fierce. But every time I hit a roadblock, I kept moving forward. I kept tweaking my designs, improving my website, and engaging with customers. Eventually, the business took off. After about 2 years, I was able to quit my day job and run the t-shirt business full-time. But that's when the real challenge started. Running a business isn't just about getting customers. It's about managing cash flow, building a team, dealing with logistics, and ensuring customer satisfaction. I had to learn everything the hard way. There were days when I felt overwhelmed, days when I questioned whether I had made the right choice. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered that advice Rick gave me. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Start now and figure it out as you go. And that's what I did. Fast forward to today, and I've expanded into multiple product lines. We've got a team of 5, and we're now shipping to international markets. I look back at the early days, printing shirts in my living room, and I can hardly believe how far I've come. The business isn't perfect, but it's mine, and that's something I'm incredibly proud of. I'll never forget where I came from, and I'll never forget the people who helped me along the way. Rick didn't give me a handout, but he gave me a push in the right direction. Sometimes, that's all you need. Someone to show you that it's possible. You just have to believe in yourself and keep grinding, because the moment you stop is the moment you lose. So, to anyone out there who's thinking about starting a business, or wondering if it's worth it, just start. It doesn't matter if you don't have all the answers. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be persistent. You will mess up, you will fail, but if you keep moving forward, you will find success. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be sitting here telling your own story one day. I was 28 when I realized my entire life had been one long, almost comedic struggle to avoid a 9-to-5 job. Let me take you back to where it all started, a time when I thought a 9-to-5 was the worst thing that could ever happen to me, and entrepreneurship seemed like the ultimate path to freedom. Spoiler alert, I was wrong about a lot of things, but it was those wrong assumptions that eventually led me to my current success. It all started in college. I was a self-proclaimed tech geek with a love for anything digital. I wasn't a straight A student, but I had something most of my peers didn't: hustle. I could sell anything, from phone chargers to old textbooks, and I would do it with such enthusiasm that even the most skeptical buyers would hand me their money. People started noticing, and before I knew it, I was the unofficial go-to person for anything related to getting a deal done. At the time, I had no idea what I was doing, but I loved the feeling of getting paid for solving problems. I quickly realized that there was a lot of money to be made in tech and digital products, so I decided to dive deeper into the world of online business. I didn't want to work for anyone, and I definitely didn't want to follow a traditional career path. I wanted to be my own boss, make my own rules, and live life on my terms. So, I did what any ambitious person would do. I jumped straight into the world of e-commerce with no experience and no idea what I was doing. I started a dropshipping business with a couple of $100 I had saved up. For those of you who aren't familiar with dropshipping, it's essentially a business model where you sell products you don't actually keep in stock. Instead, when someone buys from you, you order the product from a third-party supplier who then ships it directly to the customer. Sounds simple, right? Yeah, it's anything but. I spent countless hours setting up my website, marketing, and trying to drive traffic. I remember feeling like I was on top of the world when I made my first sale. It was a $30 product, and I made $10 in profit. But that rush of excitement was short-lived. In the months that followed, I realized that running a dropshipping business was nothing like I had imagined. There were customer complaints, unreliable suppliers, shipping delays, and the constant stress of trying to find the next trending product. To make matters worse, I was burning through my savings faster than I had anticipated. I was still living in a small apartment and barely scraping by. I remember one particularly tough month where I couldn't even afford groceries, so I resorted to eating ramen noodles for 2 weeks straight. I was working 18-hour days, 7 days a week, and the results just weren't there. The dream of being my own boss was starting to feel more like a nightmare. But I refused to quit. I was determined to make it work. I started reading books, attending webinars, and talking to other entrepreneurs to figure out what I was doing wrong. Slowly, I began to realize that dropshipping wasn't the golden ticket I thought it was. I wasn't building a real business. I was just selling products and hoping for the best. That's when I decided to pivot and create my own product. The idea came to me one night as I was scrolling through Instagram. I saw a post from someone showing off their custom phone cases, and it hit me. Why not design a unique phone case and sell it online? I had always been interested in design, and I knew enough about online marketing to make it work. So, I spent the next few weeks learning everything I could about product design, manufacturing, and marketing. I found a supplier, designed my first collection of phone cases, and launched a website. The first few months were a roller coaster. I had no idea how to price my products, and I constantly doubted whether anyone would actually want to buy them. But I kept pushing, and eventually, the sales started coming in. At first, it was slow, just a few orders a week, but it was progress. I refined my marketing strategy, ran Facebook ads, and partnered with influencers in the tech space to get the word out. It wasn't long before I hit my first big break. A popular tech YouTuber made a video about my phone cases, and suddenly, my sales skyrocketed. I remember waking up one morning to an inbox full of orders. It felt like I had won the lottery. I was finally starting to make real money, and for the first time, I believed that I might actually be able to build something sustainable. However, with success came new challenges. As my sales grew, so did the complexity of the business. I had to hire people to help with customer service, inventory management, and shipping. I had to deal with suppliers who were constantly changing prices, and I found myself spending more and more time on the logistics side of things rather than focusing on growing the brand. It wasn't easy, and there were many times when I felt overwhelmed, but I kept going. As the years went by, my business expanded. I added more products, hired more staff, and grew my brand into something I was truly proud of. Looking back, I realized that the road to success was anything but smooth. There were many moments when I thought about quitting, but the key was perseverance. Every failure taught me something new, and every setback pushed me to work harder and smarter. Today, my company is a multi-million-dollar business, and I've built a team that shares my vision. I still run the company, but now I focus on the big picture: innovation, partnerships, and long-term strategy. I've learned that entrepreneurship is not a straight line to success. It's full of twists, turns, and detours. The important thing is to keep moving forward, even when things get tough. Looking back, I laugh at the naive 20-year-old version of myself who thought being an entrepreneur was all about freedom and easy money. The truth is, it's a lot of hard work, and it's not always glamorous. But it's worth it. I'm living proof that with determination, the right mindset, and a willingness to learn from failure, anything is possible. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone considering entrepreneurship, it's this: don't be afraid to fail. Every failure is a lesson, and every setback is an opportunity to grow. Success doesn't come overnight, but if you're persistent and you keep working toward your goals, it will come. Just make sure you're ready to put in the work, because it's not easy, but it's absolutely worth it. And most importantly, never forget why you started in the first place. The road might be bumpy, but as long as you stay true to your vision, the rewards will be worth every struggle. I always thought being an entrepreneur was about taking risks and hoping something worked out. My story didn't start with me having a brilliant idea or even being confident about the future. It started with a single mistake that ended up changing the entire course of my life. Let me take you back to 2017. I was fresh out of college, a computer science graduate with a steady but boring office job at a big tech firm. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew one thing: I hated it. I hated the daily grind, the mundane tasks, the cubicles, the endless meetings where everyone pretended to care about things that didn't matter. It felt like I was just a cog in a massive machine, and my potential was wasting away. At first, I didn't even know what to do with myself. All my friends were settling into their careers, getting promotions, and buying houses. They seemed content with their lives. Meanwhile, I was scrolling through Reddit, reading about people who had started their own businesses and quit the 9-to-5 life. It sounded glamorous, but it also sounded like a lot of work. I wanted that freedom, but I didn't think I had what it took to make it happen. One day, I was talking to an old friend, Mark, who had started his own e-commerce business. He was doing pretty well for himself, so I figured, why not ask him how he did it? We met up at a local coffee shop, and I was blown away by his story. Mark wasn't a business genius. He was just a guy who had decided to sell something online, then kept tweaking his approach until it worked. That's all. But the part that struck me the most was when he said, "I wasn't afraid of failing, man. I was afraid of never trying." Those words stuck with me. I went home that night and couldn't stop thinking about it. The next day, I decided to quit my job. It was a rash decision, I know, but it felt like the right thing to do. The thought of spending another year in that soul-sucking office was enough to push me to the edge. I figured I'd give myself 6 months to try something new. If it didn't work out, I could always go back to a desk job, right? So, I made a plan. I wanted to build an app. It seemed like the most logical thing for someone with my background. I didn't have a killer app idea, but I knew that apps were booming. Everyone had a smartphone, and there were tons of problems I could solve with a good app. I decided to create a productivity app that helped people manage their to-do lists in a more efficient way. It wasn't revolutionary, but I thought it had potential. For the first few weeks, I lived off savings while I worked nonstop, coding the app, tweaking the user interface, and doing everything myself. It was exhausting, but exciting. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be alive. I wasn't just doing work. I was creating something, and that felt like the most fulfilling thing I had ever done. But then came the first major roadblock. The app sucked. I'm not saying it was terrible, but it wasn't good either. It was buggy, the user experience wasn't smooth, and I was getting terrible reviews. That's when I realized something I hadn't anticipated: the amount of failure involved. Every time I launched a new feature, something else would break. The learning curve was steep, but I couldn't afford to give up. I was too far in, and I had made too many sacrifices to back out now. I started doing something I never thought I would. I asked for help. I posted on Reddit asking for feedback, and to my surprise, people were willing to offer it. I had hundreds of people pointing out issues with my app that I had missed, or offering suggestions to improve it. I started following the advice, fixing bugs, and redesigning parts of the interface. Slowly, it started getting better. But even after all that work, the app still wasn't making money. I had invested a lot of time and money into development, but I had no users. The few downloads I got weren't turning into paying customers. It was crushing. I felt like a failure again. I remember walking around the city one night, just thinking about how I might have made a huge mistake. Should I have kept my job? Should I have stuck with the safe option? But then, something happened that I didn't expect. One of the Reddit users who had been giving me feedback reached out to me with an offer. He was a small-time entrepreneur who had experience with app marketing. He said he liked my app and wanted to help me promote it. It wasn't a partnership that would change everything, but it was a step in the right direction. He gave me some marketing tips, introduced me to some people who could help me with my strategy, and connected me with influencers in the productivity space. This was my first real break. With their help, I was able to push my app into more users' hands, and it started to slowly gain traction. But it wasn't a quick success. It took time, months of gradual growth. By the time 2018 rolled around, my app was starting to make a little bit of money. Not enough to quit my day job, but enough to keep the lights on. I kept iterating, tweaking, listening to feedback, and eventually building a small community of loyal users. I focused on customer service, responding to every email, every review, and treating my users like gold. Over time, I realized that success wasn't just about having a good idea. It was about persistence, listening to others, and continuously improving. In 2019, I finally had enough users and revenue to consider doing this full-time. By that point, I had learned some tough lessons. I had learned that failure wasn't the end. It was just a part of the process. I had learned that there was no such thing as overnight success, and that if you didn't give up, even the smallest steps forward would lead to something bigger. Today, I run a successful business. My app has grown into a platform that now serves thousands of users, and it's continuously improving. I've expanded into other projects, and while things aren't perfect, I'm living the life I dreamed of. I still work long hours, but they're hours that I choose to work. I'm proud of what I've built, and I'm constantly learning and growing. Looking back, I realized that all it took was one decision, to take a chance. It wasn't easy, and there were countless failures along the way, but it was worth it. If there's one thing I want people to take from my story, it's this. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid to take that leap. The road will be hard, and it will test you, but it's also the road that leads to freedom. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.